Hi everyone, I'm Sandy and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to show you how I made this birthday card using the Crazy Bird stamp set by Tim Holtz and distress inks and Copic markers. First I stamped the image using My Favorite Things Black Licorice Hybrid ink. This is an ink that's good for use with Copic markers. I'm using Neenah 80-pound solar white cardstock cut to 5.5 inches by 4.25 inches. And once that image is stamped on the cardstock, I'm going to restamp it onto some masking paper and mask the image. Normally I would cut the image out by hand, but I actually had just gotten the coordinating die set, and so I thought I'd give that a try. This die set actually cuts right to the image and doesn't leave a white outline, so I thought I'd give it a try for the masking paper. The masking paper is quite thin, and so if I was to do this again, I think I probably would put a piece of cardstock underneath the sandwich because it didn't cut all the way through. So as I was placing the masking paper on the image, I realized that I probably didn't need to have those pieces on the masking paper that were just black lines, and so I just cut those off, just the very end of the tail and the little curly Q on the top of his head. And I also cut the legs off too. Next I used 3 different colors of distress ink to ink up the background, Broken China, Antique Linen, and Tattered Rose. I really didn't have a plan when I started making this card, and that'll become quite evident later on. I quite often don't have a plan. To me, part of the fun of card making is just trying new things and seeing where they go. Sometimes I'm happy with it, sometimes I'm not, and at the end of the day, you know, it's a piece of paper and some ink, and I can always start again or try something else. I'm laying in blocks of all 3 ink colors on the card and overlapping one color into the next to blend them. I'll go over the paper a couple of times with each color to get a good blend. As I ink up the sponge applicator, I'm tapping quite a bit of color onto scratch paper before bringing it over to the cardstock, and I'm working in multiple thin layers rather than applying a lot of ink all at once. This will give a smoother look and a nicer blend, and there'll be no streaks or harsh lines that are really difficult to blend in. I'm working from the outside edge of the cardstock into the middle, so the higher concentration of ink is on the outer edge, and there won't be a big circle plonked right where the sponge hit the paper first. Once the background is all blended, it's time to take off the mask and color in the bird using Copic markers. I ended up trying a couple color combinations. The first one ended up looking a bit too green once the 3 colors were all blended. I wanted the bird to be more blue like the color of the top right corner. So the next little bit is coloring, so I'm just going to stop talking and I'll put on some music. coloring was done, the bird wasn't really standing out enough from the background for me. And I felt like maybe it might be because the bird and the background were too similar. So I'm masking the bird off again and adding some water droplets to the background with a brush and water, and then dabbing them up with a paper towel. This reactivates and lifts some of the color and leaves lighter spots where the water was. My plan was to give the background just a slightly different look. So here's where it's obvious I really didn't have an overall plan. I did like the effect I was getting with the water, but the masking paper was getting really wet and soggy, so I had to quickly peel it off before the bird underneath was ruined. Then I just grabbed the nearest thing at hand, which was a paper towel, and that soaked up a lot of water too. What I should have done is do the water droplets before coloring the bird, but it turned out all right. The paper was pretty wet from all the water, so I dried it using a heat gun, and I also dried and reused the mask. And then I remembered I had a bottle of my favorite things, Mixables Mist, that I'd never used before, so I thought I'd try a couple sprays of that. And I loved it so much. It did make the paper and mask wet again, so I peeled the mask off quickly and I dried the cardstock again with the heat gun. Just going over some of the black lines here with a Copic Multiliner to make some of the features pop, like his eyes. And his legs got a little bit lost in the glitter, so going over those too. Also, there was just a sliver of white along his back where the mask didn't quite line up, so I'm filling that in as well. After that, he still seemed to be floating in space a bit, so I wanted to add something to ground him. So still with the multiliner, I'm just going to be drawing in some dots to make a shadow and some texture on the ground. And then I'll do the same thing. I'll add some white dots using an opaque white Signo pen. I'm just sort of starting that on my hand to get the ink warmed up and flowing a bit. The trick with the Signo pen is that you need to have a really, really, really light touch. So just adding some white dots to the bird's body as well, just to make it stand out a bit. And that's the bird done. Now just trimming it up using the largest of the Simon Says Stamp Stitch rectangle dies. And I'll be placing it on a white card base. I'm using the Simon Says Stamp Wishing die and a product called Stick It, which is a double-sided adhesive. You just peel off one side and adhere it to the back of the paper being die cut. And then once you've cut it, you end up with a sticker once the back is peeled off. After I wrangled those little dots for the eyes, I adhered the colored image to a top folding 5.5 by 4.25 inch card base made from Simon Says Stamp 120-pound cardstock. And then I used a sentiment from I believe it's the Sending and Wishing Simon Says stamp set, and lined it up with the wishing die cut. The Stick It adhesive doesn't adhere permanently right away, so you do still have a few minutes to move and reposition things. So it's really nice for thin, intricate die cuts like this one. And then once everything is in place, you just lightly go over it with something like a bone folder or even your nail, and it'll stay put after that. I'm using this stamp press to stamp this sentiment because it's quite small, but it's also thin and long, and so I wanted to make sure it went on straight. I'm using VersaFine Black Onyx ink because it gives a very crisp and very black result. And then I'm also going over the die cut with my bone folder to set it in place, and then place the dots for the eyes. So I still wanted the bird to stand out a bit, and usually when I use just Copics for a background, I would color a light shadow just outside the image to make it look like it was popping out from the page. But since I used Distress inks for the background, I just used my black Multiliner again, and I put some of what Kathy Rakusin calls eyelash lines underneath the bird and on his back, and it gives the effect of a shadow. Little glossy accents on his eyes to make them stand out, and that'll be it for this card. I'll list all the products used in the video description. Please feel free to comment, like, or subscribe, or all three. Once again, thanks for stopping by. Bye-bye.